Hello, everyone. Art Burns here. Hope you're all doing well today. So, last night I had another one of my great webinars about stress reduction. Every Sunday night I give a free live webinar on Eventbrite that is about stress reduction. It's called How to Tame Stress and Eliminate Reactivity in Less Than 8 Weeks. Every week, I just have such a great group of people seem to show up, and we get into these great conversations about, in the question and answer about like all the different aspects of stress and how mindfulness works to reduce stress and all these wonderful topics. And I just every time I come away from these calls with just a feeling of elation and just so much excitement for having kind of shared time with people, and they're from all over the place. Last week I had people, a person from India sign on. So I mean, it's like people all over the world literally are coming together, and we're talking about mindfulness and stress reduction and all these beautiful topics. I just love it. So last night though, there was one person on the call who brought up a really interesting point that I wanted to bring up with you all, because maybe it's something that you're feeling. Okay. What she asked was, what if paying attention to the breath makes me more anxious, right? Because as you know, when we talk about mindfulness meditation and we talk about even just checking in with our bodies, one of the greatest ways to do that is to check in with our breath, right? And there's a couple of different reasons for that. Number one, the breath is always there for you, right? Hopefully. If it's not there, you have other problems aside from your stress. But your breath is always there for you, any given time, any given place. No matter what you're doing, no matter where you are, your breath is always there. And the second thing is that your breath is always present, right? Like I often tell my clients when I first start working them, I'll give you a jar with a cap on it, and you go and get me a breath that you took 5 minutes ago, and I'll give you, some ridiculous amount of money. Of course, I would never have to give that money away because you can't do it, right? Your breath is a present process. It's not even a thing. It's not even a thing that is, past tense or future tense. It's literally a process that is always happening in the present moment. So anytime you're paying attention to your breath, you're automatically paying attention to the present moment, which is what mindfulness is all about. Pardon me. There's also another reason why the breath is so important, or so helpful to pay attention to as we're developing mindfulness, as we're practicing meditation. And that is by what I ask people to do is pay attention to the breath in the sense of the rising and falling of the abdomen. And the reason why this is so effective is that, most of us, many of us, I should say, aren't breathing correctly most of the time. I know it sounds crazy, right? Because, we all know how to breathe. We've been doing it our whole lives, But the fact is that a lot of people are breathing up here. They're breathing in their chest, and when you're breathing in your chest, what you're doing is, number one, you're not filling your lungs with as much oxygen and good air as you could be. But number two, what you're doing is you're sending the signal to your brain that something might be wrong. Right? Because when we're in the stress response, when we're afraid of something, that's when we start breathing with our chest, right? So as you breathe with your chest, that sends that signal back to your brain that, wait a minute, is something wrong here? Should I be secreting cortisol and adrenaline and norepinephrine? Should I be freaking my body out to try to, try to wake it up and get it into the fight or flight response and get it into the sympathetic nervous system, rather, from the parasympathetic nervous system? And so while you're doing this, while you're paying attention to your abdomen, where your attention goes, your energy flows, right? So as you pay attention to your abdomen as it rises and falls with each breath, what you're doing is you're encouraging your body to breathe properly, right? Which is to really breathe deeply from that center of your body, pulling the air in with your diaphragm and filling your lungs all the way to the bottom. With air and oxygen, which is going to be better for your body. And then also, again, it really sends that very positive signal back to your brain that everything's okay. Like, we're in a place right now where everything is okay, right? So those are the reasons why typically I try to encourage people to focus on their breath and do so with the abdomen. However, this question from this wonderful woman last night just kind of like, it gave me pause, and I said, oh, wait a second. Yeah, what if, what if breathing, for whatever reason, when this woman was paying attention to her breath, she sensed that that's when anxiety was taking root, and that was actually causing a lot of stress for her. So in that case, I would, if I was that person's coach and trying to get her to embrace mindfulness and to practice mindfulness on a daily basis, what I would do then is I would take the workaround by simply paying attention to one of your five senses. Okay, because like your breath, your five senses are also present all the time, right? You can't see something that is not presently in front of you. You can't hear something that is not presently making a noise right now, right? You can remember something you heard, you can imagine hearing something, but if you're hearing something, if you're using this organ of your ears and your eardrums and sending that information into your brain and processing it, you're doing that in the present moment. It's the way it works, right? So for people who feel like, the breath doesn't work for them, right? And sometimes it can be, I can totally understand how this woman, I can totally relate to what she was saying, that, sometimes when we're, if we're focusing on our breath, we start thinking like, oh my gosh, am I breathing right? Am I getting enough oxygen into my body? What have I been doing all these years? Is this causing me, am I going to, get sick because of the way I've been breathing incorrectly? And once these thoughts start coming through your mind, that's when we get into, again, more stress, right? Like these are fear-based thoughts that could cause more stress than they're going to relieve. So what I would suggest to anybody who might be feeling that way, right? If you feel that the breath is somehow overwhelming to you, to kind of, to pay attention to, because really it's not about thinking about your breath, right? But if you find yourself unable to not think about your breath and instead just pay attention to your breath, well, then maybe that's where this woman was too. That you're in that kind of place. And so for those people, what I would suggest is pick one of your senses, right? And specifically your sense of hearing is always a very good one. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of times when we close our eyes and we just pay attention to what our ears are picking up, at first glance or at first listen, you hear like the big noises going on, right? Like so you might hear the rumbling of a truck, or you might hear the somebody mowing their lawn a few houses down the street, or something like that, right? But as you sit there and as you continue to just and again, you got to close your eyes for something like this, because so much of our information comes in through our eyes, right? So closing the eyes allows you to open up your other senses. And by doing that, you're going to open up the sense of hearing. You're going to pull more information into this sense of hearing. And by doing that, what you're going to find is that you're hearing many more sounds than you thought you were hearing before. Right. So for instance, and I used to do this quite often. I used to take a long bike ride, and at the end is like at the 10 or 12 mile mark of my bike ride, which was a good time to turn around. There's a beautiful waterfall. And so I used to, get off my bike, do a little stretch, have a drink of water, and then I would sit for 10 minutes. I would meditate, and just because, and I would do this kind of meditation, and this is what this woman reminded me of. I was very grateful that she reminded me. So there's the waterfall, right? So I would sit there on a rock and just close my eyes, and really by closing your eyes again, you're really opening up the other senses, right? And for this particular exercise, it's the sense of hearing, and of course you could use any sense that you want, but hearing is a very strong one. And so initially, I would just hear the waterfall and this real rush of the waterfall, and very strong sounds of that waterfall. And but even that sound, right? Like we think of the sound of the waterfall, but even within the waterfall, as you really pay attention to the sound, right, you notice that there's this one sound that's the water coming off of those rocks on the far end, but now I also hear the water hitting the water beneath the rocks, and that's a different sound. And then I also hear these little higher pitched sounds, which is on these little rocks over here. And then I hear this other sound, which basically what I'm trying to say is that you wind up opening up, you start hearing all these different sounds where you used to just think it was the rush of the waterfall. Now you realize that waterfall is made up of many, many different sounds. And that can be very beneficial in and of itself, to allow yourself to become more present and hear all of that happening. It's a very, very beneficial thing. And it's absolutely as much a meditation as paying attention to your breath. So and in that case, if that's the way you're going to go, the same thing applies, right? That you're going to, as we sit in meditation, we pay attention to our breath, right? We focus our attention on our breath, right? The idea is that when the mind starts to wander, which it's going to, right? That's always going to happen, whether you're paying attention to the sound of a waterfall, the sound of birds chirping, the sound of cars and motorcycles in the background, or you're paying attention to your breath, any of that, your mind is going to wander at one point, right? And so as your mind wanders, you recognize that your mind has wandered, and once you recognize it, you bring your attention back. Now, again, that could be bringing your attention back to the sound, the feeling of your breath, right? The feeling of the abdomen rising and falling with your breath. Or that could be, you could be bringing your attention back to the sound of whatever you're listening to, right? And so the same concept applies, the same sort of rule applies. As your mind wanders, just recognize it's wandered, and then gently but firmly bring it back. Okay, and doing that, that's where the point of the exercise is. That's the whole benefit of the exercise, or one of the benefits of the exercise of meditation, is that you're building a strength to be able to hold that focus, hold your attention on a specific whatever it is. So that's going to benefit you in many areas of your life, right? The other thing that starts happening is that, again, you hear the sounds, the many different sounds of the waterfall, but then even behind the waterfall, you notice that there's chirps of birds, like within that sound, like, kind of covered up by it, underneath it. And then, as I say, you might hear a motorcycle off in the distance, or a truck off in that distance, or, other bicyclists riding by on the bike trail, or what have you. You're going to wind up really being, completely, understanding and appreciating the depth of the sounds that you're able to hear. And believe me, folks, it is very, very deep. As you give yourself the time to sit still and allow your senses to take all of that information in, and the more still you become, the more the more sort of open to these sounds, or whatever sensation it is, the more open you become to it, the more rich you're going to see or hear or feel or know the depth of what we're talking about, of all these different sensations. And then ultimately what will happen is you can then probably, after some time of doing this, you're going to then realize that, wow, maybe I can pay attention to my breath after all, because now I've developed this skill. So now I'm in a place where, if I'm in a place that's too noisy and not comfortable to do a meditation of my hearing, or maybe in a place that there's not enough sound and it's hard for me to use that as an object of my meditation, try again with the breath and see how much that's changed for you over the time that you've been doing that other practice. Because that's the beautiful thing about meditation, is that it changes us over time, in ways that we don't necessarily realize it's happening until we take the time, again, just like meditation, until we take the time to really bring it into our awareness. Like, okay, does my breathing feel differently now? And that would be something I would actually intentionally tell someone if I was working with them as a coach. I would say, okay, for the next 2 weeks, do your meditation with the sound. But then in 2 weeks' time, I would say, now let's try again with your breath. See how it feels. See if it's any better. And I would not be surprised at all to find that it was a little bit better now and less anxiety producing, right? So anyway, that's just another sort of way in which we can practice mindfulness, and another way we can approach mindfulness. And that's one of the beautiful things about mindfulness, is that we need to be creative. We need to be open. We need to be flexible to things, and this will also, sort of inspire more flexibility, more openness, and more, patience with things. And that, of course, will benefit all of us, especially, people like parents, right? which parents, by the way, there's a lot of sounds in our lives as parents, so we can certainly use that to our advantage too. So if you'd like more information, please just hit me up with a comment below, or send a direct message. Let me help you get started on some of these very simple practices that can bring enormous benefits to you. All right, everybody, thanks for listening. I wish you well. Be back again tomorrow. Take care.